What up, everybody? It's the Build Different podcast. Today, just Justin and myself. We had another episode planned, but it kind of fell through. So I think the easiest thing for us to talk about is our fandom of combat sports. As you know, the product that we're building, it started off being built for fighters, but it's recently because we realized how many people it can help. It's expanded to kind of all sports, but our first love still is the combat athlete and combat sports. So, Justin, I want to ask you, what's your first? How did you first get introduced to combat sports, and what was the first thing you watched? Like, what was your first introduction into to fighting sports?
I remember, so for me, I remember being a little kid, and I was always very interested in action movies and all the cool fight scenes and stuff like that. I always thought that was so cool. But I remember there was one time when I was a little kid when our family we went to Las Vegas back in like 2007, maybe 2008, and I
Mm.
remember seeing like posters and stuff for UFC and pictures of Chuck Liddell and being like, "Oh, what is that? That looks so crazy." And so I discovered it that way, but I didn't become like a huge fan right away. I was not I was too young for it basically. Like my parents wouldn't let me watch it. But as I got older and stuff, I started to be like, man, like I really want to like delve into the world of martial arts more as like a fan and as doing it myself. And I really started to follow it more one during like the Conor McGregor ascendancy, when he was really, I think that was right when he was about to fight Chad Mendes that I really started following. And then from there, I was hooked. I loved his story. He was so entertaining, and he brought like so many new people to the sport, me included, as like a regular fan of it. And yeah, I've
Hmm.
been following it ever since. I do jiu-jitsu now. I tried boxing and Muay Thai. Yeah, I'm like obsessed with martial arts now. How about you?
My story is a little different. I watched it as a kid. My parents had no issues with me watching it. Um, I was even more like, from the old movies from like the 70s, 60s, the old kung fu flicks. I remember
Yeah.
my brother used to, watch them like obviously the reruns on, I think, want to say it was on USA back in the day, but I was always intrigued because I was like, man, these guys like, it was those movies where they would, and then it'd be dubbed over, English dubs. But I was just like, man, look how they're moving. That's so cool. Like, samurai movies. Like, man, I really liked their how disciplined they were. How they could mess anybody up. As a kid, you have typically have superheroes. Like kids now probably have America, Captain America and Thor and Marvel characters. My superheroes were always fighters. You know what I mean? Growing up. So for me, it was like the Tysons, the Roy Joneses, the boxing. It started off with boxing at first. I remember my brother, watching boxing matches on HBO and watching it
Mhm.
with him and my dad, and just being enamored with it. And even my sisters would come around and watch it. And it's always been big for me. Like I always admired the guys and girls that were willing to go in the ring, put their life on the line, and to prove they're the best, and also for us, our entertainment as fans. So yeah, it was the kung fu movies, the Bruce Lee movies, the old Wu Tang movies, and that's why I ended up loving. I love Wu Tang because they the movies and everything. Because I was like, man, the name is cool because they're going off the old movies and everything. And yeah, all of that stuff just made me enamored. And to this day, like a lot of these girls and guys, they're even at an older age now, are still my superheroes. You know what I mean? So that's kind of
Yeah.
how I got into it as a kid, and why I fell in love with it, and why every weekend I'm watching it. And yeah, it's now I can say I'm blessed to have a company that supports the sport and also helps the athletes and fighters. So with
Have
that
you
being
ever
said,
stepped
Justin,
or
sorry, go
have
ahead.
have you ever stepped in the ring yourself or hopped on the mats at all or done any work yourself?
Yeah, I did Muay Thai for a little while. I did Jiu Jitsu for a little while. I want to get it back into both. Just striking in general. Just want to get into it. And luckily, as you know, we and hopefully the audience knows, we sponsor a couple of really great fighters and two great coaches. And they're always like, just get your gloves and come to the gym. Like, and it's something that they've been pretty much harping on me getting in there and holding the pads and them training me and everything. So something I definitely want to take advantage, especially it's free. Back then it was like super expensive, and I wasn't. I was in my 9 to 5 job back then, and it was like that. That was one of the things that kind of hindered me from continuing. But I can get this done for free with them, so I'm down to go in there and get back at it and grow and learn. And I always talk about like Al Bundy at O'Neill getting his black belt. Like, why can't I? You know what I mean? So, um, but yeah, jiu-jitsu is always fun for me. Like, I like the chess match that plays out on the mat, and
Yeah.
striking sports. It just feels good to hit a bag and to I would suggest anybody pick up combat, some form of combat sports to protect yourself and to help other people out in the streets because you see it every day. Fighter helps people by stopping a robber or choking somebody out, and you know what I mean. It's a good thing to have in your back pocket when you need it.
More than I feel like also it also you don't. I feel like most people don't appreciate like the certain skills that it requires to be like a UFC fighter. Like there's always like the invisible jujitsu. It's the things that you don't
Mhm.
see. It's the things that you feel if someone's doing that to you that you can't appreciate just from watching it. And that's one thing that I've been doing jujitsu now probably 6 years now, and I've
Mhm.
rolled with people of all different skill levels. I've rolled with world champions, and it's crazy the difference of like in skill that people like the highest level that people can get to is unbelievable. You feel like you can't move, like you're trapped. It's amazing, man. It makes you really appreciate the work that goes into that level of skill, being like a UFC fighter or like a world champion jiu-jitsu or boxer or something like that.
So one thing I wanted to say as well, based on what you just said, is kind of branching off of it, but it's like a community too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of men, women, kids, they think that they're gonna go into a gym, and it's like Cobra Kai or something, where somebody's gonna come in and be a complete asshole to you, and they're gonna just break
Yeah,
your legs, sweep your leg. You know what I mean? It's not like that. You go in there and everybody's very, some gyms are a little different. I will say that, but people are generally very welcoming and they want to teach and learn, and everybody grows from working with each other, and that's what I love about it. And it's
right.
jiu-jitsu, you really, I mean, you can do it with a dummy, but you need a partner to do it. Striking sports, you can do that in your house. You know what I mean? You can shadow box if you want to, and it's always a great way to stay in shape and to not only the protection aspect of it and learning to fight and defend yourself, but
Yeah,
also the the mental aspect of it as well. It's great for your mental health, your physical health, and yeah, it's just a great thing to do. So like you pointed out, you can be rolling with like somebody that's a UFC fighter, and they're just your first time on the mat, and they'll welcome you because it's like indoctrinating you into a community. You know what I mean?
yeah. It's definitely a humbling experience when you roll with like a legit black belt. You're just like, wow, okay, there's levels to this, man. But
It's
yeah,
especially humbling for me, like when I went in there, because I was like, you may not be able to tell now, but I used to work a lot more. I got to get back in the gym now, but I used to, be out there benching big. You know what I mean? And then you have a
yeah,
guy that's like 150 pounds come up and like you feel like the weight of the world is on you. Can't get this guy off of you. And so that's where the respect comes in. And a funny story too about that. That's kind of where I really started to, because I mentioned boxing earlier, but really got me into combat sports, like not combat sports, MMA. And I was always a fan of like kickboxing, like K1 and those organizations. But I
yeah,
remember being in high school and these dudes talking about Pride and UFC. Like they were talking about, man, like I have these videos, these DVDs, and all this stuff of these guys in Pride, and man, this guy did that, and I'm like, what, really? And then they were mentioning wrestlers like the Tank Abbots and Ken
yeah,
Shamrock, and these guys. I'm like, they're in this Pride thing and UFC thing, and like, yeah, these guys are in it and they're fighting. I'm like, really, a wrestler? So I was like, it was intriguing to me. And then these guys were mainly high school wrestlers, so like they were doing the weight cutting thing, and so they were into UFC heavy. And so I
yeah,
remember just being in the classroom, like listening to them telling the stories about these different fights. And I'm just like, wow, man. Like I love boxing, but damn, this sounds crazy. What's going on over there in Japan and UFC. Um,
Yeah,
so right after high school, that's when I first started working out. I started going to the gym, and I think what ended up happening is like in my gym was like a bunch of big bodybuilder type guys, and like 250, 300, 350, big dudes. You know what I mean? And so one day I went in the gym and they're in there talking about, man, this UFC fighter came in and he was like 155 pound guy. He fights at 155 or whatever, lightweight. And they were saying, they pointed out one guy in the gym, really, really big guy, strong guy, lifting everything in the gym. And they were telling me a story about how the UFC fighter asked the big bodybuilder guy to choke him out, like just try and choke me. And they said the guy with all his might was like trying to choke this guy out, and the guy, little 155-pound guy, wasn't moving. He wasn't stressing. He wasn't doing anything. So then the bodybuilder, he's like, okay, you go ahead and try and choke me. And so the little, the 155 pounder is like starting to choke him. And the guy's like tapping immediately, big muscular guy. And I'm like, you're in the gym with these dudes. You're like, muscles don't win fights. We know that, but you're still like
yeah,
kind of like, yeah, little guy's not going to do anything to a bigger guy. And so when I heard that story, that even intrigued me even more. I was like, man, I got to watch this UFC shit. This sounds insane.
yeah.
So I think when I first watched it, one of my first fights that I saw that was UFC because I think I started watching Pride before UFC, but no, no, no. The first fight I saw was, and this was UFC before Pride. I had went to a bar with my boy, and we were just like trying to kill some time. I forget, we were trying to do something, and I think we were killing time. And the fight that came on was Rampage versus Chuck Liddell.
Nice.
Um, And so I'm like in there and I see Rampage come out with a big chain on and he's like got this crazy look on his eyes. You remember how Rampage used to walk out. And then you see Chuck looking like a maniac with that haircut and I'm just like these look like two freaking maniacs. Like let's see how this goes down. And I watched it and I was just like, oh my God, I gotta get more of this. And from there, it didn't take me long to like go back and watch old fights, go back and watch Pride, go back and watch different organizations, learn about all the fighters. Like within like probably a month or two, I was like, I knew everybody in every weight class. I knew their records, who they lost to, who they beat, and yeah, automatically I was a fan. So the funny thing is like I wanted to ask you about this is, um, well, first of all, my story is pretty crazy of how I got into it. It's kind of similar to yours. You saw Chuck Liddell on the poster, but
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you this though, like most fans of MMA aren't fans of boxing. Would you say that? And why is that in your opinion?
Mm, I don't know. I feel. I mean, I haven't been following boxing as nearly as much as I mean, probably like you have and stuff. I watch it for the big fights and stuff, but I
Hmm.
don't know. It's just something about MMA. Like to me personally, like I'm a jujitsu guy, so I want to see jujitsu at the highest level. I love seeing like the different possibilities with like Muay Thai and wrestling and how those things all work together. That's the most exciting part. Whereas I don't know, boxing it feels very old school to me, which is it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like there's some amazing fights, but like even it also just I feel like boxing like they're whenever they have a big card, I feel like they just go. The pace is much more different than a UFC card. Like the Terrence Crawford Errol Spence fight. I remember it took them like an hour just to walk out to the fight, and in the meantime, the UFC had like three fights happen in the same time. It's kind of crazy, like the different pace of it. It feels very like a little bit slower to me. It feels a little bit more. Um, I don't know, like the big fights, it takes a long time for them to happen. Whereas MMA, it's like the big guy who the big guys are, and eventually, pretty soon, they are going to fight each other. Whereas I feel in boxing, it's a little bit more politics and stuff, a little bit more like behind the scenes stuff going on, which I don't like as much. And I don't know, some of the decisions I also completely disagree with sometimes in boxing. Well, in MMA too, but
Yeah,
um,
both.
Yeah, both, but I don't know. Just overall, I prefer MMA. I think. What about you?
I love both. I love fighting in general. So like even I'm big into like Glory. I wish Glory used to come on TV more often. I wish it was back on TV again because those are some of the craziest fights. I love like Muay Thai fighting. I love Tiffany Van Soest and Nikki Holskin and these fighters. Like those are some of the fighters I love watching. But I wish Tiffany Van Soest would um, transition to MMA so she got like more praise for her skills because she's I mean, super skilled fighter. But yeah,
Yeah,
I love them both. You know what I mean? I think so many times like I meet a like I go to an MMA event or meet an MMA fan and they're like, man, F boxing. You know what I mean? Like boxing, they crap on each other all the time. I'm like, why? Like, you know what I mean? It's both are science to me. You know, and both are beautiful. Both are like have their their good points and their bad points. So you
yeah,
know, the events too are very different. Obviously, you went to the UFC event with me, and that was your first one, right?
yeah,
Yeah, we got to do more, but yeah, the environment's way different. I think it's a more of a kind of more of a party atmosphere, like bros and loud
yeah,
people. You know, boxing events like a big boxing match. It's like everybody dressed up, gets dressed up, wearing their best. It's like it's an event. You know what I mean? Like a show up and show out type of an event more so than an MMA event. But love
yeah,
both. Best place to see them is the place you saw the poster, Vegas.
yeah,
I've seen boxing and UFC in different cities and stuff like that, but nothing beats Vegas in that atmosphere, in my opinion. I would love to go to a boxing match in London as well because those fans are amazing over there also. And probably when I
yeah.
go visit family or something, I'd love to go out there for a big fight. But yeah, it's two very different dynamics, but still both very incredible. I mean, biggest biggest fight I think I've gone to. I've been to a Mayweather fight, him and Shane Mosley. I went to I was out there for Pacquiao and Hatton. UFC would have to be the first fight where Weidman beat Anderson Silva. I went to
Dang,
that
that's
fight
awesome.
and that atmosphere was crazy because Spider nobody expected him to lose and Weidman. You remember going into that fight, nobody gave Weidman a shot, and
Yeah,
we were in the crowd with the Brazilian fans that Frankie Edgar had just beaten, I think, before that fight, Charles Oliveira.
yeah,
So the Brazilian fans wanted blood at that point, and they're like, "Okay, Spider's coming up. He's going to redeem us, and we're going to get that blood on, the blood we were looking for. Ufa Moher or whatever they say. You're going to die." So they were enraged after Frankie won, and so then they were expecting Spider to do it, and Anderson, obviously got knocked out, and it was just I don't know, it was a crazy moment, just sports moment in general. But to be in that arena to see it and see the shock on everybody's face was crazy. Um, I
how do you
went to him
feel
and
like?
Weidman the second. I mean, him and Chael Sonnen the second one as well. I went to a bunch of fights back when the UFC used to put the big fights on, biggest cards during Fourth of July and International Fight Weekend. Sorry, what would you ask?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, since you've been following combat sports, a little bit longer than me, like how do you feel like it's evolved since, like, from here up until whenever you first started watching it? Because I feel when I first started really following it, like I said, it was during like the Conor McGregor era, back in 2014, I want to say, so almost like 10 years ago. And
Hmm.
I remember back when they were on a Fox, and that was like the mainstream kind of thing. And now they're on ESPN. Now it feels like every fighter is almost like an influencer in their own way and stuff, and
Yeah,
just kind of like the ebbs and flows of each division too, and like the different countries or the fighters from different countries coming up. Like Georgia, as there's a lot of Georgian fighters now. I feel like that wasn't a big thing, at least from what I saw. That wasn't like a big thing up until recently. So I'm curious for you, what are like the big things you've noticed?
yeah. It's so when I started watching, it was like back in the UFC, for example. you'd get the pay per view, and all you would see was the main card. They never used to put the undercard on. Well, you would be lucky if they would play the undercard fights. Say, for instance, in the main card on pay per view, somebody would get knocked out really quickly. They would go back to a hot fight from the undercard. So all you were getting was a couple of fights a lot of times, and then they eventually progressed to like putting the undercard fights on TV and then put them on pay per view. But back then, it was, when I got into it, it was very much mostly American fighters were the top guys.
Yeah.
The Tito's, the Chucks, the Rampages, um, the BJ Penns. These guys were the face, and there's be some European fighters, but not like now. The sport was very also too. You'd have guys that had their specialty, and that's the only thing they really did. It wasn't really truly, in my opinion, mixed martial arts at that time. So you'd have like the wrestler that would just take guys down. They had decent hands, or the striker that would just stand up and strike and try not to get taken down. You'd have the grappler that was just like going for a takedown to try and submit you. And now I think it's a lot more diverse. It's everybody's got a ground game to a degree. Everybody, their striking is pretty much up there. They can at least grapple defensively. Um, and back then it was one of the crazy things you don't think about. Leg kicks weren't really a thing back then. Calf kicks weren't really a thing back then.
No, not really.
Um, Guys and girls weren't taking each other out with leg kicks back then like they are now. It's like not it wasn't a staple of everybody's game, but now everybody kind of has to do it. You know what I mean? Defend it and do it. And then yeah, the influx of like Eastern Europeans now. You know what I mean? Sambo fighters.
Yeah.
Um, Russians, Georgians, Ukrainians. It's just Eastern Europe is huge now, and it's like you had Fedor back in the day, and he was kind of the guy from Russia that was murking everybody in Pride, and never got into UFC, which is kind of sad. But you had him, and you had some other like couple Russian fighters. You had Krokop from Croatia. You had but now it's like heavy influence of European, Eastern European fighters, and Brazilians were always there. They'll always be there.
Mm.
I think one of the things too is like you used to have jiu-jitsu specialists that would just wreck people if that was your specialty. Remember
Yeah.
Damian Maya? You could not Damian Maya get you on the ground and like sleep you. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
guys and girls learned how to fight that and defend it, and they knew how to do it offensively and defensively. So I think the sport everybody's so much more well rounded now. So it's not one guy or girl can't just come in and steamroll somebody with one discipline.
Yeah.
And as
Go ahead.
no, I was going to say as far as boxing, boxing's changed because I think this is a great year in boxing. It's getting back to what it should be, the best fighting the best.
Yeah.
So I'm happy about that. But for years, it's been a money game, or who's the better businessman, a businesswoman type game, and it's turned a lot of fans off. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of guys and girls realized you got to take the big fights. You got to fight the fight people want to see. It went from being better, kind of the best guy improve or girl improving yourself in the ring against whoever anybody said could beat you, and like that kind of pride to hey, I'm make more money than you, less risk. I have a name. I've sold arenas. I've done pay per views. I'm gonna take the path of least resistance. But this year, thank God, boxing seems to be back on the right path, and I hope it continues that way. Because I think fans of MMA would love boxing if the fights they wanted to see happen more frequently.
How do you feel about like the UFC fighters coming over to boxing now and making their extra money? Do you think that's helping the sport of boxing or MMA for that matter? I guess, or do you think it's kind of a detriment to both?
Understand it's like go get your money type of thing. You know what I mean? Like boxing, that's the one thing boxing has over MMA is that these fighters get paid a hell of a lot more. But from the perspective of like enjoyable fights, I don't like it. Like you put anybody, you know what I mean? It's like you put a alligator in a cage with a tiger, you know what I mean, on land, the tiger might destroy it, you know what I mean? You put a a tiger in the water with a bunch of gators. You know what I mean? It's just you can't expect somebody from one type of sports that stands a certain way, moves a certain way, to go in and do anything in a sport where a guy or girl practices that every day and they stand that way, they strike that way, they wear these type of gloves. Like I don't like it. You know, I prefer people dominate in their particular sport rather than trying to cross over and getting dominated for the paycheck. But like I said, I understand it. Like it's you got to get your bread any way you can. So I'm not. I don't fault them for doing it. As a fan, I don't like. I'm not particularly excited about it. Like Ngannou and Fury, I'm like, if
I
Fury's
mean, I'll watch
beating
it.
heavyweight boxers, what do you think he's gonna do to Ngannou? Come on, man. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, that's for sure.
I had a question for you. Is there any fights that in MMA it could be crossover from Bellator to UFC, one to Bellator, PFL to? Is there any fight or fighters you would like to see kind of cross over, or are there any fights that you wish could be made that or that in history, I guess you could say as well, that were never made that you were like, damn, I wish this fight would have taken place.
I would have liked to see Kayla Harrison fight Amanda Nunes. That would have been a really good fight. Um, I was really bummed when Musasi left the UFC. I thought he was a
I
monster,
love
man.
Musasi.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love
him.
Musasi.
Yeah, like him. There would have been so many good matchups for him in the UFC if he stayed. Who else is there? Michael Venom Page. That would have been really cool to see him fight someone in the UFC.
He's
Um,
a free agent now, so he could.
yeah, he could now. Who else is there? I don't know. Fedor for sure. Having him come over would have been
Yes,
legendary.
that's what I want. That's one I was going to mention.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of them. It's sad that like that's kind of like the business side of things that it's the UFC isn't necessarily the best fighting the best. It's about like the business side of things too, which kind of detracts from it a little bit. But still, I mean, there's still a lot of good fights to make in those organizations. But what matchups would you like? What's your dream crossover matchups? I guess.
I would have loved to see. I would have loved to see, like, if I could go back in time and everything kind of like bring these people from their different eras. I think you mentioned Kayla Harris. I would love to see her and Ronda Rousey. I think that would have been, a cool fight when they were, if like Ronda was in her prime and Kayla, now in her prime. I would have loved to have seen that. Most current, if John Jones didn't go up to heavyweight, I would have loved to see him fight Israel. That would have been a really cool fight.
Yeah,
Um, Everybody wanted to see Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre. That was a
yeah,
fight that never happened that people really wanted. I really would have loved to see George St. Pierre and Khabib. I mean, can you imagine that? That would have been bananas. Like if they could have worked that out and made that happen, um,
that
that would
and
have been
then
insane.
yeah, I'm still salty about the Tony and Khabib thing. I know Tony's not, he's on a bit of a losing streak now, but he was the man for a while, and I would have loved to have seen that.
The worst part about that situation is just how weird the delays were and how tiramisu sending Khabib to the hospital, Tony tripping over a wire during a press conference and blowing out his knee. I mean, that fight is like it just wasn't meant to happen, man. Like just like six cancellations for various weird reasons.
Something like that,
Um,
something ridiculous.
I would have loved also for Fedor to come to the UFC. I would have loved to see him fight Brock when Brock was on. That was a big fight that they were talking about that time. There was a lot of trash talk back and forth. That would have been a really good fight. And there's numerous fights. I would love to see the Pitbull brothers in UFC.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. Now that
Michael
Chandler's here,
Venom Page. Yeah, like bring the Pitbull brothers over. I mean, you know what I mean? Them. There's a lot of
yeah,
guys in one I'd like to see. I was upset when Mighty Bounce went over to one. I would have loved to see him stay fighting. Him and Henry Cejudo, another rematch. There's a lot of fights I would have loved to see. That's just kind of like, damn. Even in boxing, there's a ton of fights. In boxing, I think even more so than MMA fights that I would have loved to have seen that never took place.
Yeah, I think I mean, that's the case in pretty much every combat sport. There's always going to be a fight that didn't happen, but there's always going to be like an asterisk, like, oh, this guy didn't fight this fighter, and there's some reason, there's some
This
stipulation, there's some reason why it didn't happen.
Yeah, this fighters I wish like I mentioned Tiffany Van Soos in Muay Thai. I would love to see what she would do in the UFC or Bellator or something. John Wayne Parr. All of these great Muay Thai fighters. I would have loved to seen them come over to other sports and try them out and see what they would do because that's the crazy thing about Muay Thai. They can wreck people with kicks. Like, what would that look like in the UFC? You know what I mean? Everybody's kicking each other's legs. You take a leg kick from one of these people that train it to destroy. You know what I mean? What would that look like in the UFC? So, or Bellator, or PFL or whatever. But yeah, that's a sad thing, and that's why I think the video games are really cool because you can kind of put like Undisputed is that new boxing game, and you have UFC, games, putting the old fighters in with the new. That's the only way that we're kind of able to see some of our dream matches that we weren't able to get.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can dream, I guess.
So jiu-jitsu, who would the dream guy or girl be to roll on the mat with?
I mean, of course, to roll with Gordon Ryan, that would be insane. I mean,
I saw a video
obviously,
of him and John Jones rolling. Did you see that?
yeah, I did see that. That is pretty crazy
Yeah.
that like two goats are basically training together. But
So Gordon
yeah,
Ryan would be your dream matchup on the mat.
yeah, I mean, he would destroy me. Like it wouldn't be close, but just to say that I rolled with Gordon Ryan, that would be pretty sweet. I actually just rolled with one of the Meow brothers a couple months ago. He did a seminar at my school, and I mean, he barbecued me, but it was fun.
Yeah, that's the thing about it too. Like somebody, destroys you on the mat. Like it's a learning experience. I mean, you should be getting better from it. You know what I mean? It's not something anybody out there thinking about doing jujitsu. It's not something that you should shy away from. So
No, not
or
at
be
all.
upset about.
Yeah, for sure. It was a fun learning experience. He wasn't like mean about it or anything, but it's just kind of like, it's just like playing chess. Like some people just, there's just a higher level than you. There's not a whole lot you can do about it, but it's fun. It's fun to see that. Wow, that's how good you can get at this. It's cool.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna wrap up now. But yeah, Justin, I think that's why I love what we're doing so much because we're building something for fighters. There's a lot of other companies doing it, but a lot of not a lot of companies doing it. I should say. I've seen some products here and there from people, but I don't think they're gonna put the love into it that we will because we're actually true lovers of the sport. You know what I mean? A lot of these people doing it like found a way into to make money through the sport, and I'm just like, yeah, that's cool and all, but you gotta have the love for the fighters, the love for the sport, the love of the game, and that's what I think is going to separate our product, not only being more innovative and more of a futuristic product, future-proof product, but just the love that we have for the fighters. Because I'm never going to get in the octagon or the ring. You probably unless you're doing jiu-jitsu, might. But we can live through these fighters, my superheroes, your superheroes, through this technology and through the data that we're able to give them. I think that's the beauty of our company and why I enjoy doing this so much. So, with that being
I
said, it also gives us the leeway, hopefully, to get on the floor and watch these fights and be in the back rooms and stuff. That's all I've always dreamed about, being closer to the fighters. So, with that being said, Justin, again, thank you for joining me. It's been an amazing call. We could talk fights all day. And we want to thank the audience for tuning in with us as well. And comment about your favorite fight or comment about your favorite fight, your dream matchup in the comment section. Let us know. We'll see if we can simulate it somehow with data.
see ya.